Hello, just a quick disclaimer before we start this episode. This one does deal with the loss of animals and may be emotionally difficult for some listeners. Whether it's a pig, a dog, a duck, or a turtle, if you've loved and lost an animal, this one might be for you. Hi, and welcome back to Barn and Soul, where we explore the deep connections between humans, animals, and the land. I'm Kendall, and today's episode is personal. It's about something that all animal lovers face, yet few of us know how to really talk about, and that's grief. Specifically, the grief of losing an animal. If you've ever lost a pet or a farm companion, you know this kind of loss hits different. There's a kind of silence that follows, literal and emotional. Today, I want to share a few personal stories from Dalby Farm and even explore some science behind why this grief runs so deep, while also offering, a few thoughts on how we can move forward. Not necessarily by getting over it, but by honoring their memory through continued compassion. I'll never forget Nate. He wasn't an endangered breed or a show goat, just Nate, the Mini-Nubian goat. Not necessarily quiet, but he had a sweet presence on the farm. I think I had maybe just graduated college, so maybe it was around 2011, when my mom, Cheryl, noticed something was wrong. His demeanor was off, and more worryingly, he stopped eating. If you're familiar with goats, you know that's a major red flag. Goats are ruminants, meaning they digest their food in stages, and their stomach is split into 4 compartments. If they stop eating, it can lead to rumen stasis, where fermentation slows or stops entirely, and it becomes a cascading issue. The bloat, the toxins, the whole system is delicate. My mom, as always, was on top of it. Dr. Karen, our vet, was on top of it. I'm sure she was out multiple times. I know my mom was out there constantly checking on him. And by the 3rd or 4th day, we thought we were turning a corner. He ate some maple leaves just before we went to sleep. So I found myself in a place of hope. It seemed like, oh, good, he's reactivating his rumen, things are moving in the right direction, and yeah, I felt really optimistic about this. Okay, wake up the next morning, it's probably 7 a.m. I go out first thing to check on him, and I could not believe my eyes. I went into the barn, and I found him gone. I mean, by all rights, it shouldn't have been that surprising because he had been ill all week, but my brain could not compute. I stood there just in shock, and my fiance at the time, James, now husband, had turned, or he had just left for work, was probably only a mile or so down the street when I called him on my cell just sobbing, and he turned around, and the moment he came back and met me there, it's etched in my memory forever. Not only that, but I've carried Nate specifically with me ever since, and sort of what that lesson taught me, not necessarily with the sad angle of it, but in a way that always keeps me remembering how deeply the animals matter and how, lucky I really am to be part of their lives, even though it does end in heartbreak. I learned to maybe gauge my optimism a little differently, and or maybe not have as much overall, because they all will go eventually, and so the quicker I rationalize that part, the faster I can get to appreciating the now with them. So we often find ourselves wondering in the middle of any kind of pain, right? Why does this hurt so much? Why? Like you start to gaslight yourself. Like, why? It's a cat, it's a dog, it's a goat. Why am I breaking down? Research from the American Psychological Association has consistently shown that the loss of a companion animal can trigger grief as intense as losing a human loved one. Often that grief is invalidated. It's not always given the same space. A 2020 study published in Anthrozoos, I'm sure I pronounced that wrong, a journal of human-animal interactions, found that 72% of pet owners experienced significant symptoms of grief for at least 6 months after their pet's death, including crying spells, insomnia, appetite loss, and even a sense of guilt or failure. But only 12% sought any form of support, and that's largely due to societal stigma. So we're often told it's just a dog or you'll get another one, but I'm laughing because it's a terrible thing to say, but relationships with animals, especially when you raise them, care for them, sometimes even birth or bottle feed them, obviously not like you don't birth them, but you're there for their birth, are just as real and emotionally charged. These are valid attachment milestone moments that any human, any loving, compassionate being would feel emotion towards. So yeah, if you lose that connection to those memories, you're entitled to grief. My mom knows this pain better than anybody, and I can't and will never speak directly on her behalf, but I can reflect on a moment back in the early 2000s, just as Dalby was kicking off in its new chapter of becoming a sanctuary for endangered farm breeds. She was, for the first time, trying to breed the Arapara island goat. We had just linked up with what is now known as the Plymouth Patuxent Museum. It used to be the Plymouth Plantation, but she connected with them, and we were able to start the attempt to breed this endangered goat. And there's a lot of theories as to what went wrong. We believe that perhaps the bloodlines were not far enough apart from each other, but no matter what the case may be, one of the kids from the very first litter was a fragile newborn, and he ended up having what's called failure to thrive, which is a syndrome that can occur for a number of reasons, from genetics to maternal rejection. Like I said, we think in this case it was genetics, but despite my mom's best efforts, that baby did not make it, and it rocked her. In fact, she hasn't intentionally attempted any goat breeding ever since. To be fair, that's partially because the goat breed in question is so rare that the bloodlines along the East Coast are far too closely related. But anyway, over 20 years later, the fact that she still had been hesitant to do that again, it says a lot about A, how much love she gives, and B, what an emotional toll it can take. But then, and I'm going to have an entirely separate episode about this, but to link Plymouth Patuxent back into our story yet again, in 2023, we brought home Mabel, and another Arapara doe, and we didn't know this, but at some point in that transit, like as in the process of her leaving their farm or their living museum, she got impregnated, because 5 months gestation is all it takes for a goat. So by the time she was out of quarantine and it was spring and she was outside more, we noticed that she was unreasonably large compared to Trudy, who was the same age, but her frame was just so different. So yeah, again, my mom being like, we called the vet, got a blood panel done, got the results back on Friday. I believe it was April 28th. And, yep, she's pregnant. Cool. Whatever. My husband, again, James, didn't really it didn't register to him that this was news. The following morning, as he was going up to open the barn, as he always does, and as he was going in to feed Mabel, there were 2 goats in there now. Now there was Mabel, but there was also this brand new baby. And that's how Betty appeared. And my husband, he had this faint memory of just being told that Mabel was pregnant, but he didn't know that she was like popping off, like giving birth to the baby. So we literally had a birthday party starting when my husband was up there discovering Betty, and he was searching high and low for somebody to tell, let alone take over the situation. I got texts. I was over there within 10 minutes. I was so excited, but yeah, that's all for another day. But that's all for another day. But I think often loss does close doors, but sometimes life finds a funny way of sneaking one open. Sometimes the grief is worse when it feels unfair. Most people expect to lose an animal to age or illness, but nothing really prepares you for sudden, brutal endings. We do everything we can at Dalby to protect our animals. Predator-safe enclosures, pretty much constant checks. Nobody ever really leaves the house, and reinforced fencing. But nature doesn't always follow our plans. A good example would be a few years ago, we lost a dove that, for many years lived part-time in our farmhouse during the winter and part-time outdoors in an enclosure during the warm months. She was very much so part of our family. One day my mom walked out and found, only part of Lovey-Dovey. Apparently this weasel had gotten into her enclosure. My grandfather, who'd lived on this property for his whole life, so he's 80-something years old right now, he's never seen a weasel, but I had seen a weasel earlier that week, and it just never registered to me that A, they would be interested in the dove, or B, that they were able to literally weasel through the wire into her pen. But that is what happened. To say it broke something in me for a minute would be an understatement. She had this incredible second chance at life, and at this point she was thriving and just so acclimated into our annual routines. And yeah, that taught me something yet again, that we try our best, but we can't protect them from every little thing. We can ensure that the time they have with us is filled with care, joy, and dignity, and we can't dwell too long on what happened. We can only take the knowledge of those events and try to apply them in proactive, preventative measures moving ahead. I am always asked, how do we keep doing this? How do we keep going? Oftentimes my own mother says this, how can I keep doing this? It's too hard. That's the question, right? All of it is hard. And one thing I've learned is that honoring a lost animal doesn't always mean memorializing them forever. Sometimes it means opening your heart again, letting another animal in, and continuing to do that work of love. So at Dalby, our philosophy has become, we honor the ones we've lost by giving others a taste of the good life that they knew. And that's not just sentimental, it's also a critical piece of the conservation mission here. The animals we care for, like the Arapara goats, the Ossabaw Island hogs, Shetland sheep, Royal Palm turkeys, American blue and chinchilla rabbits, these breeds need people to keep caring, to keep loving, or they will be lost too. So when kids come to the farm and fall in love with a chicken or a goat, when they learn their names and ask questions about their stories, that's how we keep compassion alive. That's how we build a future that's not only more sustainable, but it's more human and empathetic. So if you're grieving an animal right now, you're not alone, and it's not silly. and you're allowed to feel terrible. You loved them. They mattered. Let yourself feel it. Journal about it. Talk to someone who gets it. Maybe send a photo in to an artist who makes portraits and hang a piece of art on your wall. But whatever you do, don't close off your heart, because, at some point, you just might be open to that other animal out there that could use the kind of love that only you know how to give. At Dalby, we keep opening our gates to endangered breeds and rescued souls alike. That's how we heal, and that's how we remember. Thank you for holding this space with me today, and until next time, take care, and don't forget to appreciate the rare and wonderful things in life. Thank you for listening, and if you want to support our mission, share this podcast, follow us on social media, and come visit us at dalbyfarm.com. Our country store has something for everybody.